So at this point, we spent quite a bit of time on psychoanalytic theory of personality, looking at Freud, looking at Carl Jung, and a little bit with Alfred Adler. We spent a short little stint on behavioristic model of personality. We don't spend as much time on behaviorism when it comes to personality because the behaviorist school of thought just kind of looked at personality development differently than some of these other branches of psychology. But of course, we did look into it a little bit to see how the behaviorists weighed in on personality. But today we get to switch gears and we get into a third theory of personality, and that is humanistic theory. So we're going to start talking about the humanists, and we're going to meet two of them, well, two that we've already met and two that we know. And we're going to look at, so that means we're going to look at Abraham Maslow and his theory of personality, as well as Carl Rogers. In this lecture, we're just going to look at Abraham Maslow. But before we even get into the specifics of Maslow's theory, let's just talk a little bit about humanistic. Oh, not ready for Maslow yet. Let's just talk a little bit about some general things about humanistic theory of personality. So we follow up psychoanalytic theory and behaviorism with humanism for this reason. Because as was the case with many of the things in the world of psychology, humanism kind of had a reaction to the theories of the psychoanalytic psychologists and the theories of the behaviorists. In fact, we've learned that humanism was sort of born out of rejecting those earlier schools of thought. And so, much like everything in the world of psychology, the humanistic point of view sort of rejects the behaviorism and psychoanalytic model of personality as well. And a big reason is because what this last bullet says here, it says that the humanistic approach just has a much more positive, optimistic view of human nature, human behavior, human personality, and just humans in general. The humanists didn't look at personality development or anything with human behavior in terms of us being driven by these primitive, animalistic urges. They didn't want to accept that we were simply controlled by exterior stimuli like the behaviorists would like to believe. They didn't believe that you could simply punish and or reward somebody and control and understand everything there is to know about them. It just felt like humans were much more complex than that. And with that, also, like I said, took a much more positive view of human nature. And so that is also true with their theory of personality. It's quite a bit different than Freud's theory, than Jung's theory. Certainly different than the behaviorists and B.F. Skinner. So, as I said, so that's just a little introduction to the difference between humanistic model of personality versus those other two. But I said today that we wanted to dive into and specifically look at one humanist's theory, and that is Abraham Maslow. Maslow is a name that we've thrown around a little bit here since the beginning of the course, but we haven't dived too deeply into anything real specific about Maslow's theories. So let's do that a little bit here today with his theory of personality. A very important vocabulary term that we want to associate with Maslow just in general, but specifically with the way he interpreted our personality development is this term right here. This is an important vocabulary term. He coined the phrase or the term self-actualization. Self-actualization, according to Maslow, was this point in our lives when we reach our full potential. It's the point where we are able to accept, realize, and express all that we can be and all that is unique and specific to us. So it's sort of like this pinnacle of where we want to get to. Interestingly enough, it's probably unlikely, really, to be quite honest, and Maslow would even agree with this, for any of us to ever fully get to that point. And so when you start connecting this idea of striving to reach your full potential, this self-actualization idea, to personality development, what Maslow believed was that healthy people who are developing appropriately should always be living in a way that is trying to get to that point. We should be striving to grow. We should be attempting to be the best that we can be, to express the best us of who we are as an individual. And as long as you are moving in that direction and you're living your life in that way where you're striving to reach your full potential, whether or not you ever get there completely doesn't really matter. It's all about sort of that, to take a phrase from Miley Cyrus, it's all about the climb, climbing up that mountain, trying to get to the other side and see what's there, right? Hopefully some of you know that reference. All right, so how do you actually live that way? Well, on page 393 in your textbook, there's a whole list of things that Maslow theorized healthy, self-actualizing people do. So I'll let you take some time on your own to go into the book there and look at page 393. But what ultimately what Maslow's saying is that this list, and there's more than just what's on page 393, but this list of personality traits, I probably should be careful with that phrase, this list of behaviors and this list of things that we should be doing are very positive functions of us reaching our full potential and being able to strive to be all that we can be. So you can take a look at that and see what he means by striving to reach your full potential. One of the other things that Maslow, it's sort of coupled in here with his idea of self-actualization, but one of the other terms that he coined was something that he established and called our hierarchy of needs. So if you know what the term hierarchy means, it kind of means things that are placed in a hierarchy are things that are placed on certain levels and they go from the bottom to the top, so to speak. Well, Maslow believed that humans go through this growth process throughout our lives, and this is how we're developing our personality, trying to satisfy certain basic needs that we have as human beings. And he placed these specific needs into a hierarchy, into this, the way he did it, into this pyramid here. I'll show you right here. And so what he proposed is that we have certain physiological needs that we have to satisfy early on. Then we strive to get certain needs of safety, and then eventually needs that we have dealing with love and belonging, and then self-esteem, and then eventually look here what's at the top. The top, if we can successfully navigate through and achieve all these other needs, we might get to the top of the pyramid, to the top of that climb, and that's that whole idea of self-actualization where we're fully expressing who we are. Now, I'm going to give you an assignment here. You'll be working on this. You can refer back to this, but the assignment you're going to be doing is going to have you diving deeper into this concept, filling out this pyramid, answering some questions. But when you get to that, you'll have a better understanding of what I mean by this hierarchy of needs, or I should say what Maslow meant by his hierarchy of needs. All right, so let's kind of put all this together. We've got this concept of self-actualization, this idea of reaching our full potential. Part of that is the journey we go through trying to satisfy these certain needs that we have on that pyramid. In the end, Maslow's theory ultimately rejects some of these other theories that we've been learning about. And ultimately, it is rooted much more in this idea of humans being good. It's a much more positive look at our development. In fact, even the way he went about studying and proposing this theory was in many ways the opposite of what Freud and other psychoanalytic theorists, and even the behaviorists really, because rather than studying patients who were sick and suffering from mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff, Maslow and the other humanists decided, hey, why not study healthy people and figure out what it is that they're doing that is allowing them to reach this idea of their full potential, of this self-actualization. So it's one thing to look at people that are having problems and try to figure out what their problems are and why that's happening. It's a whole other way to look at healthy people and say, all right, well, clearly they're doing something right. Well, what is it that they're doing? And that's where you get to that list that you looked at in your book. The humanistic approach does not, it doesn't put out the idea that healthy, self-actualizing people never have any problems and they're just perfect. Self-actualizing people that are living in this, kind of moving on this pathway, they do still have problems and issues, mental health concerns, that kind of thing. They can still become depressed. They can still have anxiety. They can have other, setbacks in their life. But the thing is, what Maslow realized was that these people who are living this self-actualizing lifestyle have much more skill in dealing with those issues and those problems, coping with the setbacks that they have in life, and then moving on healthfully afterwards. So that was the kind of the approach that he took. Now, much like Freud and others, psychoanalytic theorists and behaviors were criticized for different things about their theory, the humanists, and Maslow in particular here, he received his share of criticism from the other side as well, because if you start looking at some of the things in his hierarchy of needs, if you start looking at some of those things that he listed as self-actualizing type behaviors, there is a lot of subjective interpretation there from Maslow. There are a lot of kind of value-based assessments of these things. Basically, he's saying these are the good behaviors that you should have, and this is the way you're supposed to live. And in some way, that kind of departs from the true science of psychology. So he was criticized for bringing that subjective part of his own value and moral system into it. And I think you'll see what I mean by that whenever you start looking at this hierarchy of needs and this self-actualization exercise that you guys are going to do. In fact, I should probably stop it there. Yeah, we're going to leave it at that. Let me bring that back up in case you can get all those. So what's going to happen now is that you are going to do two things. One, you have a short assignment just dealing with that pyramid that I showed you, that hierarchy of needs. And then there's a little bit more, it's not intense, but it's just a little bit more reflective of an activity. You're going to do a little self-actualization test, so to speak. It's more of an inventory than a test. And you're going to get a score that'll help you see maybe where you are at this point in your life in terms of, are you living in a way where you're trying to self-actualize, where you're trying to do those things that were listed in the book, where you're trying to get to the top of that pyramid, however you want to put it. So you have those two things to work on, and hopefully after that, you'll have a pretty good sense of Maslow's theory of personality and his ideas about self-actualization and the hierarchy of needs. Good luck.